How do I protect the data that's most important first, and then be able to recover that data so that I can start my business again, right? Is that fair to sort of put it that way?
Yeah, I think it's important to put it that way. And I think the piece that often gets missed, Pete, from our customers is the threat of an insider. Nobody wants to think about it, but when you plan and you're looking at your cybersecurity posture, you have to consider that somebody internally is a bad actor, is paid to be a bad actor, has a bad day, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
They need to consider that in their defenses. And if you're just thinking about people externally, they're very sophisticated if you get a nation state for sure. But that physical access and that additional knowledge is something that you have to consider when you're doing your planning.
Right. And that insider. So let's dig a little bit on that. It might not be someone, an actual individual that works for your company that is disgruntled or been hired. It could be somebody outside that's stolen those credentials, right, through another cyber attack, a ransomware, malware attack, and it is using those credentials as if they were an insider, right? So that can be an insider too. So then that's your threat vector, right? The fact is I can't prevent 100% of the attacks, and the real possibility is that somebody, either a person that works for my company or someone impersonating a person that works for my company, is now able to access my networks just like they were an IT administrator. So
there's a great,
what do you do?
Great quote out there, and sorry,
no, please.
That I've heard. I don't know the source, but it's hackers used to hack in, now they log in.
Yes, I've heard that same thing, and I think that came from a healthcare CIO. Hackers used to hack in, break in, right? Today they log in because they have the credentials. They've already stolen your credentials. They're already in your network. They know you're going to go to your backup, and they know you might have DR and business continuity procedures. So the field has changed. The playing field has really changed. So this is the environment. What is Dell Technologies? Let's sort of take a step in a little different direction now. This is the environment we're living in, our customers are living in. Dell a few years ago started working on a solution for filling the gap, the data protection gap that regular data protection, traditional data protection, let's say backup, archiving, disaster recovery, it really leaves a gap that these cyber threats and cyber criminals can use to infiltrate. And that's a good example of what they did at Sony. Sony didn't have anything beyond their backups. That was it. That was the last line of defense. So what have we done here at Dell Technologies to try to help our customers address this issue of that cyber gap?
It's really around elevating the backup infrastructure, the investment that our customers have already made in disaster recovery and business continuity, and being able to use that as a starting point for a cyber recovery. So with our cyber recovery solution, which we've invested a lot of time and effort in, the idea is that we can leverage a part of the backup and we can protect that data through an automated air gap in a data vault, if you will, that's going to be super ultra protected from a threat actor. So it's not backup, right? We still need backup because we may have physical or operational disasters. Backup by itself isn't enough because the threat actors can access it and delete data or corrupt data if they have sufficient credentials or way in, or they breach the security model. And so having this extra copy of data that's protected in this manner for the most critical applications is our focus. And Pete, what we've done with that really is, and we were the first, is kind of elevated and crossed the backup with cybersecurity recovery and made those something that actually functions in both of those worlds. So it's a secure copy, but it's also more or less a backup copy that can be used for recovery.
And it's not meant to, I think this is important, it's not meant to replace your regular backup or your regular disaster recovery, or even if you still use tape, right? It's not meant to replace that. It's really a modern solution to the modern threat, and what we call Power Protect Cyber Recovery, as you mentioned. So Thank you for that, Jim. This is so let's go a little bit deeper. What the use case for cyber recovery, as you talked about, is different from backup. It's certainly different than proactive cyber prevention like network detection or virus protection. Those are also very important. How does cyber recovery, differentiate itself in the recovery aspect? So what is it doing differently? You mentioned air gap. Maybe we should talk a little bit about what an air gap is and what it isn't for our listeners who may not be familiar with it.
Yeah, I think high level. So we use the NIST cybersecurity framework a lot to frame up our discussions because we're talking to different groups. And high level, you've got in NIST, CSF, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So we're focused on that recover capability. Those other things remain important. Keep the bad guys out. Let's protect our data. Let's be able to respond to them quickly if they get into the network, and let's root them out and limit what they can do. But let's have this recover capability. So that's kind of the starting point.
Okay.
Then, as you say, there's a lot of things we have to do to protect this data. Not a lot of standards yet, and we can talk a little bit about the regulatory environment and kind of what's out there. But the best standard is let's have that copy of data somewhere where nobody can touch it. So we physically isolate and network isolation of that data copy so that even insiders or people who have credentials or have access just can't get to that data.
Yep.
And of course, having it offline all the time wouldn't be useful. Yep. You can't do anything with it and you can't update it. And so we've straddled that line of automating the update process, which is the operational air gap, so that it's useful, but also that it's still very secure even when we're updating the data. So that's really the magic that I think we've brought to the problem there is making that update process very secure.
Right. It's sort of it's the balance of securing the data, separating and segregating the data, and really isolating that set of data. And this might not be everything, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, right? You can imagine maybe a CIO or an executive or IT decision maker in the audience thinking, how am I going to protect all of my data, all my applications, everything from a cyber attack in a vault of this kind? That's really not what we recommend for our customers in terms of starting the path down cyber recovery. And we're going to talk about that coming up. But I just wanted to mention a couple of things that you talked about. One was NIST. You mentioned NIST. NIST is actually the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, which is nist.gov. And one of the things that they do is they've created a cybersecurity framework that Jim mentioned. So that's something that you can check out. And it's something that has really been used as a blueprint or a template for industries and organizations and even, non-U.S. environments to create sort of a cyber resilience strategy, a recovery strategy, an incident response. What happens when we do have a cyber attack? What's the next step? And, for those of us listening that haven't really been through a cyber attack, maybe you've gotten a ransomware, in your personal email, but you haven't experienced what, attacks like City of Baltimore or City of Atlanta, where somebody shows up for work, on a Monday morning, and there's a sign taped to the front door that says cyber attack, computers are down, please go home, updates coming. It's chaos, isn't it? No matter how prepared you are, Jim. You've dealt with this. Can you maybe share a little bit with us on that?
Absolute chaos. We kind of talk about these things in our comfortable chairs well after the fact, and everything that happened. But we talked to some of our customers in Europe who were hit by NotPetya, and you think about that attack, and people who aren't familiar, it's just a very fast-moving, actually cyber weapon that got into networks and moved very quickly to encrypt and destroy all the data that it could see. At the same time, it was proliferating what it was accessing and widening what it could access, and then encrypt and destroy and wipe out master boot records and just bring whole platforms down. And a couple of our customers that we talked to, they knew something was wrong, and they saw strange messages on screens, and then all of the craziness started just ripping through their networks within minutes. So for some of them, 8 minutes, maybe an hour to get through everything. And during that time, Pete, you don't know what's going on, and by the time you kind of figure, you don't know that it's not Petya when it's happening. It's only later. You think there's just something strange.
Yep.
The network's gone, and then people start trying to do their job, and they just can't. One other thing that I always throw out, because it's a very human notion, is that for one of our customers, the NotPetya attack even took out all their coffee makers. So you think about the Internet of Things, and everything has an IP address for various reasons. They couldn't even make coffee on site. So that's how much chaos there is on some of these attacks.
That could ruin anybody's day.
Yeah,
I just have to say that.
Jen, yeah, that got Jen's attention for sure. Everybody's, but it's actually true. I mean, if you start to think about medical devices that are IoT endpoints, that's keeping me alive. That's kind of scary, right? So,
very,
yeah. The degree to which we live our lives online, and to the degree to which our lives are driven by data, is just a perfect environment for cyber criminals of any kind. And let's take a break for 5 minutes.